Hi there, welcome back to the Potato Reads. This is chapter 23. Here we go. ST, Despair Central, Seattle, Washington, USA. Dennis and I plodded westward along the streets at the whim of his nose. Intermittently, I put out a call to Aura, gulping down my pride, and asking for the whereabouts of the college crows. Northern flickers, barn swallows, and cedar waxwings darted past, absorbed by duty. Sharp, chirruped responses told me that I'd been heard. A great blue heron cruised the sky like a giant airbus. Dennis seemed particularly absorbed, lost to trailing the crows. He had abandoned his immediate surroundings and even his sense of sight, bumping into a signpost and then stumbling over a cooler filled with long rotten organs, consumed by what the smells said, and on pinpointing one particular odor thread among billions. Never had I seen him so utterly spellbound, so I made us into one entity to protect him. He was our legs and GPS. I was our eyes and ears, in charge of immediate vigilance. We passed storefronts, homes, a gas station whose bones were blackened and burnt. We came upon a sick mofo whose fingers were missing from clawing at the road. It appeared that she had been trying to escape, to flee her vehicle, but the long teal scarf around her neck had gotten caught in the wheel of her red Prius, snapping her neck and tethering her to its body indefinitely, forever on a leash. Nearby, perhaps newly dislodged and with a story it could never tell, a mofo's lonely green head rolled down the street like a volleyball in a sandstorm. No amount of duct tape could put that back where it belonged. The crows had mostly flown over residential areas, home after home, each painful to bypass. But what could we do, just the two of us? I kept alert for signs of life, mofo or domestic or animal shuddering with disease, but my heart focused on the task at hand. Dennis lifted his head only once. Droopy eyes focused on three protracted necks that stretched up to the top of the Starbucks iconic mermaid sign. For once, long necks didn't fill us with quick terror, and we fleetingly enjoyed the sight of towering, long-lashed giraffes, their bodies a brown mosaic. With their tongues flickering out like blue lizards, they munched on the ivy leaves that were slowly consuming the building, draping over the Starbucks sign in a deadly hug. We pressed on. Soon after, a chestnut mare trotted past us, a cluster of weeds churning between her velvety lips. Her unshod hooves clapped against the dying cement. We locked eyes. "So there you are, Crow," she said, incredulous. "Excuse me?" I asked. "I thought you were a fairy tale." She let out a laughing whinny. There wasn't much point in trying to engage with her. She was clearly a happy meal without any nuggets. Her coat shone, and her portly belly was distended with her fill of abundant grass and perhaps even a foal. She was still saddled with her bridle and the ever-twitching severed legs of a rider that didn't seem to bother her or impede her sweeping freedom. Several blocks of a new neighborhood were flooded, and we chose to swim through them. Dennis paddled through the murky, frigid waters with his nose suspended in the air, still soaking up the scent of the college crows. I kept a lookout for ripples in the water, for the shine of eyes above the breathing line, for anything that might have made this its home. There was just no telling. Opportunity and danger were everywhere. We emerged, soaked but unscathed, and continued the trek, finding ourselves crossing the spacious grounds of Ballard High School, a sprawling brick edifice framed by a crescent-shaped driveway. Its walls and windows had been barricaded crudely with nails and wood. Spray-painted signs with ghostly, ephemeral messages said, "Run! Survivors gather here, and power off!" Survivors gather here. My heart started to race. Steady, ST, steady. But maybe there was just one, hiding out, living here. I tried to tuck my excitement under my wings and kept alert. Intermittent pools of blood, mounds of weathered books, and a rogue pair of red-smattered sneakers told a story of panic and mayhem. I fixated on a lone backpack. Near the pink backpack were lumps of muscle and tissue breathing and bubbling in that nightmarish way I'd seen before. I studied the army of lined candles and chalkboard set up to pin photos and missing flyers. Tethered to its staff, the American flag fluttered gently in the breeze. A survivor. I bowed as we passed underneath it. In hindsight, it was probably my fault. I had dropped my vigilance again, distracted by the bus riddled with bullet holes. What sort of bomb had blasted such a gargantuan hole in the road, and wondering what had happened to the young mofo whose haunting sign read, "What we planted has come back to strangle us." What I should have been thinking about were the pools of blood and the smell of fear that pinched the air. Dennis didn't have a chance of seeing it coming. He was possessed, too engrossed in the flight path of black birds. They had seen us already, though, had long smelled us lumbering toward them. That is their way. And it was because of me, my particular condition, they had switched their genes on, lit them up inside. The one time I had snuck into Woodland Park Zoo, Big Jim and I had strolled around, me on his shoulder. It had been a quiet day, as the weather was weepy and most of the children were back in school. After what had happened with Tiffany S. from Tinder, Big Jim needed a distraction, and this had been his solution. He didn't want to be around other mofos, and the calming beauty of our city's fine zoo was nourishing to his battered heart. We had been watching the Malayan tigers lounging in their newly restored habitat, a mecca brought to life by a monolithic banyan, sinewy ficus trees, and bamboo, with a keeper's up-close section to allow the zookeeper mofos to touch and interact with the cats safely, offering them squirts of milk from a spray bottle. When we arrived, the tigers were luxuriating, sprawled out, one tracing his ebony stripes with a barbed tongue. Their fiery fur was tinged with the moisture of recent rain. A small crowd of mofos had assembled to admire their serene dominion. One young mofo started to roar at the tigers, and Big Jim told him to shut his fucking face up. The mother, fear glistening in her eyes, scuttled the little mofo away sideways like a crab. Then a curious thing happened. A mofo with glasses and an oxygen tank on his back, life-sustaining wires snaking across his face and up into his nose, was wheeled into the tiger viewing area. It happened at a speed too fast to comprehend. The terrible three shot toward him like bullets, pounding paws on mesh, their ochre eyes fixated, trained on the wheelchair mofo with sheer and utter tunnel vision. They had been switched on. Tigers are triggered, summoned, awakened by weakness. They react to it instinctively, a knowing in the stripes of their souls. Here again were those terrible three. And now I was that weakness. They had smelled the damage in my wing, perhaps from miles away, and here we had walked right into them. The larger of the three brothers, with eyes like burning embers, took 2 steady steps toward us, massive paws pressing into the earth. Tall, unruly grass framed a feline face, a co-conspirator in his stalking. Dennis bayed, formidable, deep-chested, long, low howls that reverberated through me. Woo! 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 Brothers 2 and 3 stepped forward, forming a triangle of teeth and stripe. The largest brother's lips curled, whiskers hiking upward into a snarl that could stop a heart. A V of geese flew overhead with harried honks. In desperation, I called out to them, "Help us! Help us, please!" In a flash, they were gone, honks echoing behind them. The biggest tiger wrinkled its broad nose, narrowing its burning eyes, baring its canines, porcelain smooth and yellow. Meat terrors. The gravelly growl released in a slow, shuddering stream that rumbled the earth. The fur along the 3 tigers' backs stiffened. Dennis bayed and bayed. Ooh! 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 He paced on the spot, stamping his paws, and I dug my feet deep into his back, holding on for life, preparing for the wrath of the Panthera tigris. The shoulder blades of all 3 cats rolled like slow waves as they slunk toward us. They froze. The larger tiger lowered, distributed his weight onto his back legs and haunches, readying to pounce. My beak was open, painting clouds of distress into the air. 3 brother tigers would now share the bird that got away. Ting! The sharp chime startled us, tigers flinching. The tiger brothers scanned for the source of the sound. Ting! Another ringing clatter that spun our heads to the left. Something had struck a row of glass vigil candles, shattering one of them. Dennis whined. I looked up. The sky was dark, filled with the bodies of hovering birds that emerged from over the tops of red maple trees. More and more crows, black beauties, clouding the airways above us, claiming the sky with their magnificence. Their wings filled our ears with ceaseless whooshing as they flapped with intention. Ting, ting, more tinkling, the shatter of glass, a new world soundtrack. Ting, ting, ting. The crows were releasing objects from their clutched feet, rocks, pebbles, quarters, Wristwatches, batteries, ting, 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 ting. The tigers lowered their heads, pacing to avoid the raining projectiles. New masses of crows appeared, pelting down their treasures, missiles from beak and feet. Ting, 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 ting. Nails, bolts, light bulbs, screwdrivers, crab claws, the mandible of a mouse, scrap metal. Ting, 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 ting. Forks, coasters, salt shakers, Alcoholics Anonymous recovery medallions, dentures, figurines. Dennis seized the distraction by its lapels, running for cover. I crouched, splaying my wings to stay on his back, and we tucked under the broad branches of a nearby Norway maple. We watched the tigers spin and snarl at the avian onslaught, swiping and lunging at the air. The pounding was relentless, bits and bobs, nicks and knacks, tokens of mofo creativity raining down on them like a tropical monsoon. The tigers flattened their ears, roared their contempt, and bounded away, tails whipping behind them. A swarm of black trailed them from above to make sure the job was done. I fluttered my gular, utterly amazed at the ingenuity of the college crows, how they worked together as a single entity. A damn smart one at that. The object had been valuable ones, honestly, good enough for a sneaky cache. And they'd all but sacrificed for me and Dennis. The whooshing of wings signaled the landing of many crows onto the thick grass surrounding the Norway maple. Some perched in the branches above us, more breathtaking than the image of the Greek mythological angel Ichabod, who flew too close to the sun. A glossy sheen of feathers drifted down to the ground in front of me. Cry. Silence floated in the air between us. I didn't know how to start, how to pull myself together and stop fluttering my gular. Dennis slumped into the mud at the tree's base, utterly exhausted. I'm sorry. I was wrong. Wrong about everything. We came to find you, I started. Cry cut me off with one curt bob of his head. Such a simple and powerful gesture. He was absolving me of everything. Like Dennis, he was quick to forgive. He shook the feathers of his neck, the living embodiment of grace. Dropping down from the sky was a tiny feathered puff I instantly recognized. The house sparrow jutted along the branch, head darting to and fro, performing a jerky little series of jumps. I told the crows about you. I told the crows how you saved my life, cheeped the sparrow. Thank you, thank you, thank you. The sparrow tells me that you pulled him from a hollow home, said Cry, his voice as steady as the tide. Yes, I answered. We're trying to free the domestics that are trapped in homes. I want to preserve the last living legacy of the mofos. Cry nodded slowly, his eyes shiny. All of them? I felt a sharp pain inside, overwhelmed, the dread of defeat. We are doing the best we can. You and your dog? Yes, Dennis and I, and Cinnamon, but we lost her to the one who spits. Cry nodded. He'd seen it before. We can help one another. It is time. Show us how it is done. He leaned his magnificent beak toward me. Teach us to touch through glass. Crows cawed in rampant excitement from the surrounding branches. There was an angle to this. I felt it. Why do you want to know how to break the windows, Cry? Waited silence. A multitude of dark eyes looked down from the forks of branches. What would breaking glass allow Cry to accomplish? A muffled slurping sounded out. All eyes landed on my bloodhound partner. Dennis had picked yet another stellar moment to polish his peeper. The little sparrow looked on in revulsion. I cocked my head sheepishly. Cry delivered his answer in a grave tone. We don't have a lot of time. Listen to me. Danger is everywhere, and something bigger is right now on its way to us. There's a war coming, Blackwing, and you have very little time to decide whose side you're on. The hollows are dying. The unbroken, bear and wolf, cougar and coyote, are coming down from the mountains, growing stronger, feeding and birthing young, increasing in their numbers. Creatures have escaped the zoos and parks and the homes of hollows. With the top predator changed and gone, those who hunt are looking to claim the land with tooth and claw. This is a fight for territory. The war of land is coming, and every single species has begun to slaughter for the biggest piece of it. Every predator is vying for space. Look around you, Blackwing. Look at the ravenous green, the trees, the weeds, the grass. There is an explosion in all directions, life colliding with life. Nature is looking for her balance with the unbridled brutality. There are no longer barriers to hold anything back, and someone will become the victor. Someone will swoop in. We were the hollows, black shadows, living by their sides. The land in our flight path is Crow territory. It is known. We are strong in numbers, and I intend to claim what's ours. My murder wants access to the hollow homes, to make them our own and claim the inside treasures. We have an opportunity here, a chance. We must help one another. We are more powerful when we work together because we look out for one another by being one. That is the code of murder. War. Yes, war is coming. And I tell you now, while we still have time, that it won't be like anything we've ever seen. I lose myself for a few moments to thoughts of World Wars One and Two, the American Revolution, the Battle of Hastings, the Gulf War, Tibet, Kosovo, Cyprus, some of the many, many times when mofos fought over land and resources. Territory is the source of almost every battle ever fought. Every inch of what Cry called the big beautiful blue had been fought over many times. I hadn't thought about this. That without the number one predator on earth, there would be savage bloodshed to conquer the spoils. So will you help us rescue the domestics? I asked. And we will provide you with, he paused, eyes taking in the desecrated high school, the pools of blood, the scars of a bomb, and the recent memory of the terrible three. Protection for both of you. An alliance. Dennis had fallen asleep under the Norway maple, wiped out from the trekking and baying and general keeping alive in a sharp-toothed world. Gentle snores and whistles fluttered from his jowls, and that magical nose, our secret weapon in the new, beautiful blue. Yes, I told Cry, we will show you how to shatter glass. Cry nodded. He released a shuddering rattle from deep in his throat. Then he stretched his wings to the ends of the earth and let out a hoarse caw, a curious utterance I didn't know. Clarion crow calls lifted into the sky. I had no idea what or whom they were addressing with their strange song, but they were doing so with an urgency I'd never heard before. Aura strummed, crooned, and trilled with intensity. Dennis rolled his eyes to register I was okay, and then resumed his slumber, tired to his bones. Come, it is time. We must fly. Cry was calm, stoicism in the feather. He stood under the stretched limbs of the Norway maple with the command of a king, the wisdom of the wind. His brethren poured sound into the sky, expelled their lungs around him, a never-ending summoning. But Cry, I can't fly. Something's happened to my wing. I'm as useless as a fucking penguin. Cry turned away from me, his glossy tail feathers stroking the grass. He raised his head and waited. Within seconds, a shape burst through the clouds, a dark V that rode the air. What's, I started, but succumbed to staring up at the approaching entity. Cry kept his focus on the V. As it dropped down in looping circles, a flash of white gave its identity away. It was a bald eagle. This didn't seem like a wonderful development. Eagles and crows are known nemesis. Crow hatchlings taught to detest the birds of prey for their egg thievery and predator power. Crows mob eagles every chance they get. I waited for the murder to activate, to commence a Herculean mobbing of the Talon one, but Cry didn't move. Something about the way he acted so purposefully, or perhaps just because I had developed a respect for this Crow King, made me trust his choice to silently watch an archenemy draw near his family. The crows fell silent as the eagle dropped down with a piping chatter of high-pitched notes. I have to be honest here and tell you that I'd always resented eagles and their undeserved status as our national emblem. But having never personally mobbed a bald eagle, I'd never been in this sort of proximity to one before. This bird, with her buttercup yellow eyes and perfectly alabaster head plumage, her voluptuous shuttlecock tail, and the rich chocolate of her body, rendered me a statue. She was flawless in feather, strong and savvy. She looked at me, right fucking at me, with that iconic regal expression, daffodil yellow eye, absorbing and adjudicating with a sharpness rivaled only by her talons. Bald eagles are majestic as fuck. If we were going to dive headfirst into a war, I couldn't think of a more emboldening mascot. Cry strode toward her. The eagle chittered. She spread her magnificent wingspan and lowered her formidable beak. Hurry, Cry said, turning to me. It is time. That's it, chapter 23. Woof! Big stuff happening. We'll see you next time for chapter 24.